change today, because I know I won't have a chance of getting your attention on Thursday, even though we will still have class. As I always get around, I will be looking around in a couple of weeks on that Monday before our first law exam. I expect to see some on those we can look at during the pharmacotherapy class too. But anyway, all kidding aside, just to pick up where we left off before, and again, kind of checked in on everybody ahead of time, but if anyone's not hearing me, I am starting the lecture here. We have finished up at least discussing adulterated disc branding one more time. We'll mention that several times through the course, remembering that goes way back to some of those earliest regulations related to pharmacy practice, and that it's still used today extensively, both in doing the right thing as well as people that are charged with doing the wrong thing. And several of these links here show some things related to problems with manufacturing. They do use the adulterated, misbranded words. So again, that kind of give you a way of getting in your mind the difference in those, what they relate to. The misbranding frequently is a labeling problem. We're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about labeling requirements. The main thing I want to make sure you have in your head is that labeling involves every bit of the packaging material, the printed information, the graphics for a product. The FDA looks at that as part of the approval process. They want to make sure that it's not misrepresenting. There's not something on there that gives the person a feeling that this is a better drug or a worse drug. You just have the facts, but it also has to have all the things that they require on there in the appropriate places so that people will have it for reference. Things like potential allergens and things like that. We talked about directions back when we talked about the Durham-Humphrey Amendment. For OTC products, it requires that there be adequate directions for use is the term that they talk about. It is not required that the product is intended for prescription-only dispensing. Remember, the Durham-Humphrey Amendment was the first time it actually made the distinction between drugs that required medical supervision, those would require a prescription, and those that were safe to use without medical supervision. And those could be acquired over the counter as long as they had proper labeling, which included adequate directions for use. Before that, it was a little shady as far as what required a prescription and what didn't. And again, people being prone to do the wrong thing might dispense prescriptions that they shouldn't be doing. So this would really firm that up back in the Durham-Humphrey Amendment. Notice I don't have dates on there anymore, and I think I've mentioned a few times I am not going to hold you responsible for those dates. The main reason I put those in there as we go through it is to kind of give you an idea of basically how long it took for these things to be approved and the sequence that they were approved. So it is important to know the sequence, but not the specific dates on those. The federal caution was also first required in the Durham-Humphrey, and that was the whole legend was the wording part. Caution, federal law prevents dispensing without a prescription. And that has since been shortened to RX only, just because there's so many other things required on the label now, just kind of shorten that down. But that is on prescription-only products, and OTC meds do have to have their adequate directions for use. For all manufacturers' containers, and these are prescription manufacturer containers, these are the things required by the FDA. And again, I'm not going to list half of these and have you come up with the others or do any requirements like that, but do be able to recognize, again, for the purposes of the MPJE, what things are required on the manufacturer's prescription bottle label. Definitely the name and address of the source is something you might not think about looking at that often, because usually there's something about the logo of the manufacturer, but there'll actually be some printed information that does give you the location of the manufacturer, and it's not always the marketing person. It's the people that actually manufacture the product. Again, this becomes important if you have to start tracing it back for the purposes of recall, if you have an adverse drug reaction or something like that. I think you all are pretty well versed in the idea of a lot number and expiration date. We'll talk a lot more about expiration dates and some other types of dates that we might use for compounds or for repackaging as we go on through the course. Believe it or not, as much as we all rely on the NDC number now, the National Drug Code, it is not a FDA requirement that it be included on all manufacturers' containers. Okay? So that's a real good source of a test question. It is not an actual requirement, but it is usually included, and again, if it's submitted as part of the label that a manufacturer submits to the FDA, there are some guidelines. The main guideline is if it is included, it should be included in the top or the upper 1/3 of the label. This is again for our convenience when we're looking for it in the pharmacy. There's a few exemptions or exceptions to that, and I'll show you one in just a minute. It used to bother me a lot more than it does now because basically now that product is switched to generic, and I couldn't make the check the bottle, but sure enough, the NDC number is in the upper third of the bottle, generic. But somehow they, for reasons I never could figure out, they allowed Benicor, yeah, it's the next slide there. Actually, the NDC number is not in the upper third of the label. And I kept thinking that somewhere along the way, these are in some kind of other outer packaging, and they have a little window in them or something like that, but I never was able to verify that. But sure enough, now that it's available as a generic product, the label looks much more traditional. So anyway, I say that just to kind of emphasize, because it's not in your notes, but it's another one of those little value-added things you get to come to class today, that NDC number, the guideline is by the FDA, although it's not required, if it is on the label, it should be in the upper third of the label so that it's easy to cite. Barcodes, however, are required on all products if they're supplied to a health system or a hospital. Okay? And the reason for that is because many of the error prevention and medication administration recording systems now use the barcode to verify that all the way from the time it's received by the hospital to the time that medication is actually opened up in whatever kind of container it is in and given to the patient at the bedside. So it is a requirement that any product is going to be dispensed in a hospital. So you may not have an NDC number. Technically, they wouldn't have to put it on a product if it's not going to a hospital. But again, most of our community practice dispensing systems do use it now, again, as an error prevention code, maybe a little time saving as far as us not having to search up the different NDC numbers, but the vast majority of these are used as part of an error checking protocol. So you're going to see that on essentially all packages. Even in a hospital, again, if it's going to the hospital, even down to the unit dose packaging, it has to have that barcode on it, again, because so many systems use that as part of their error checking protocol. And that barcode must be a code for the NDC number. Okay? The UPC code is on all the other things that you see out in the real world, all other over-the-counter medications, but also just, pack of pens or pencils or anything you buy off the shelf in Walmart or a general merchandising store. That is not going to include the NDC number. That's a universal product code, which identifies that product for a company's database as far as charging you at the cash register or whatever, keeping up with their inventory. So do be able to differentiate that the barcodes for products used in hospitals has to contain the NDC number. Essentially, all prescription-only products now contain barcodes, again, because it is something we use in our error prevention protocols. I already mentioned the Benicor just happened to be, they got approval, they have this in a lower position. It's one of those things that bothers me, doesn't bother anybody else. I just was wondering what the reason for that was. So if anybody ever comes up with that or talks to someone that has an answer for that, please let me know. Okay. Again, once more to emphasize, the manufacturer's container label. I put this on here for a couple of reasons. One, we're going to talk about Vioxx later on, but do realize it's not just the bottle and the label that's very prominent on the bottle, but all of this is part of the labeling as well, as far as the FDA and drug approval process. The label includes all that materials, even advertising information, everything except for oral statements. Okay, that's a big factor. We do have manufacturers' reps that are limited to only be able to talk about things that are in the product labeling, but it does stop short of including oral statements as far as the labeling. So again, power of free speech or whatever. We'll talk about the differentiation between manufacturers' reps and how their speech is limited versus some other categories of people who might work for the drug manufacturers, drug science liaisons, and people like that. Okay, other labeling requirements. Must list all therapeutically inactive ingredients. Obviously, it has to list the active ingredients as well, but it has to list the other things that you learned about in pharmaceutics that are part of, making a capsule or compressing a tablet, the binders, the excipients, all those different, pharmaceutics words you learn. Again, the reason for this is because some patients may have an allergy or or a very severe adverse reaction to those, and they do need to be included in there so that you can trace back. This is one of those GMP, good manufacturing practices requirements. They must be listed in alphabetical order to help you find those. Again, remember a lot of chemical names have more than one name, and specifically this is where I'm going to talk a little bit more about Vioxx. I don't think any of you have ever seen Vioxx available. It's been taken off the market, but it was a drug very much like Celebrex, and it was actually introduced before Celebrex. Vioxx actually contains in its incipient a sulfa-containing product, but it's like a sulfate. And some people that have severe sulfur reactions, this is important to me because my mom did, she could take Celebrex, it didn't work. She could not take Vioxx, it did work, but then they realized she was extremely allergic to it. They did end up taking Vioxx off the market for other cardiovascular problems anyway, but she was never able to benefit from the Celebrex like she did from the Vioxx. Or the Celebrex is the one that she was not able to take. The Vioxx she could, and they took it off the market, so she wasn't able to use that for her arthritis. Okay, it is, again, going back to the therapeutically inactive ingredients, it is separate from the active ingredient list, but it has to be contained in the labeling, okay? So that means it may not be on that physical little letter label, the part that's stuck onto the bottle. It might be in the labeling, the FDA category of labeling. It might be in the package insert information, okay? So again, you do need to be able to look at that if a patient just insists that they have, this version of that drug that's green causes them to break out in a rash, and the yellow one doesn't. We all have been played that with the hydrocodone product. The blue one works for me, and I have an allergy to the white one, that kind of thing. But legitimately, that can happen. And again, that list of ingredients is available for you to reference. They must use the official name of those ingredients. The official name, again, goes back to those official compendia. Usually it's a USP or National Formulary listing of products that have been approved for use in pharmaceutical manufacturing. It has to be listed by that name. If they have a proprietary flavoring or fragrance, they can use a shortcut. A lot of those use a lot of very complicated organic molecules and things like that, so they might shortcut those things just for the ease of, representing what they're talking about on that. But for things like traditional excipients and binders, things like that in a product, they have to use the official name of the USP so that you can compare that and see what the ingredients might be. Shifting gears a little bit to the OTC label. Again, these are the ones that have to have a label that includes adequate directions for use by the common layperson. They have specific wording on there, and the level of understanding they would have sufficient information provided so that a layperson could use the product safely. Doesn't mean that we're not able to give them some additional information on that. This is where, again, there's definitely some benefit in coming in and buying those in a pharmacy where you have pharmacists or pharmacy students or something like that they can consult with versus buying it at the Golden Pantry or in a grocery store that doesn't have a pharmacy. So these are the other points that are required on OTC labels. Again, they differ a little bit from the requirements for prescription-only labeling, so do be aware of those. I'm not going to test you extensively on these, but just be aware that there are some differences there. They still require that you put on there the name of any habit-forming drug, although essentially all of those have been taken out of OTC products now. You actually could buy some asthma medications up until just a few years ago that contained a very small amount of phenobarb in there, and that was a requirement on there. It said warning could be habit-forming. It does require the active ingredients and certain other ingredients. So realize there that they don't necessarily list all the non-active products in a over-the-counter medication. So again, we have patients that have severe allergies to certain components. This is why, again, it's good for you to have some products that you know more about and can recommend to those patients to not put them at risk of taking those. It again requires the address of the manufacturer, package, or distributor to be somewhere in the labeling. Might be on the outside package, but it should be contained in some of the materials at least that are packaged with those over-the-counter medications. This is just a generic example of an OTC product. Open Nexium here, and these are those categories that they put these boxes out here. Notice here, this might be in very, very small print on the outside of the box. It will actually list the inactive ingredients. So you can again look at that if a patient has a severe allergy to certain ingredients. This one actually has some sucrose in it. Alcohol is another one that's in a lot of liquid products. Again, patients that for one reason or another should not be consuming alcohol, you could help guide them to those products that don't contain those based on what's on these labels. Again, the adequate directions for use. You can point this out to the patients, hopefully go over that with them. But again, it should be something that they know is on there so they can refer to them. And is required, standard requirement of over-the-counter products. Okay, then there are some special label warning requirements, and again, because they separate these out specifically, I'm going to go over these. And I want you to at least have an idea of these for the MPJE. I'm not going to get specific on the exam of which drugs require special warning labels, but these can be included on OTC and prescription only. Some of these are prescription only products, and they require the special labeling to be included on the packaging so that you can remind patients about it. This is especially important if you're repackaging, because it has to be included on repackages as well. The repackaging used to be done much more frequently. Even in community pharmacy practice, we would get things repackaged from the wholesaler. They would buy huge bottles of 5,000 of something and repackage them into hundreds or whatever. That became very difficult to do because they do have to reproduce everything that's on that manufacturer label. So luckily we don't see that as much anymore. But where you get into this is if you decide in your pharmacy practice that you want to repackage some OTC products, maybe house brand them or whatever, do remember that you have to duplicate everything that's on that manufacturer's package to be put on your package. And this goes all the way back to that U.S. versus Sullivan, where he was cited for misbranding that antibacterials that he was selling those little boxes to those GIs over in Columbus, Georgia, to treat their sexually transmitted diseases. So that again is a long-standing situation there. This is even required for those things that are repackaged for use in long-term care facilities. Again, some of those may be patient administered, but you definitely have to reproduce those warning labels for the people that are going to be administering them, even if it's administered by medical personnel in a long-term care facility or inpatient facility. So just be very careful about repackaging. There are some other considerations when you do that. Here are those things that require special labeling. One is tartrazine dye. It's also referred to as food, drug, and cosmetic dye number 5, FD&C number 5. Not a lot of people have allergies to tartrazine, but some of them have very severe allergies. So it is required that a special warning label be put on there to alert you as the pharmacist, but definitely to alert patients on OTC medications that might contain this. Sulfites, a very broad chemical category. You can remember that because what else has sulfites in it that bothers people, gives them headaches? Wine. There is some low sulfate or no sulfate wine. I always make the joke that it may be the sulfites causing them to have the headache, it may be the quantity of wine they drink causing them to have the headache. But anyway, sulfates can be included as antioxidants in a lot of products. And again, some people have severe allergies or it does trigger migraines, things like that. So it will be in things other than just wine, your OTC medication. Mineral oil, this is an old product. And again, if you go back to the USP or even the Remingtons and look at the mineral oil, it will give you all these specific labeling requirements, and they are still required. This is one of those that if you repackage mineral oil, believe it or not, when you work in the pharmacies tonight, go grab a bottle over the counter and look at all the stuff on the back of that, and it will actually say it's for bedtime use only, not to be used in children or others with swallowing problems. The concern here is about aspiration, where it should be used with caution at bedtime, because again, once somebody reclines, the chances of aspirating that, getting in their lungs is increased. Should not be used in pregnant females, again, because of the potential for reflux, things like that. I don't know, do y'all talk about that in pharmaceutics? Anybody get that? We used to talk about that in pharmacy school, but it's still on the books, and I want to just make sure you at least recognize that, things like MPJE. Wintergreen oil, chemical name methyl salicylate. Smells like wintergreen. Okay, not supposed to use the word that you're trying to define, but it has that kind of spearminty, wintergreen smell to it. The concern there is it is toxic. Children will smell it, think it's something good, tasty, like candy, and consume it. So it's limited to 5% only in products, again, just for its aroma. But it has to have some additional labeling on there to encourage people to keep away from children. Isoproterenol products, and again, a lot of the inhaled steroids have become over the counter. Isoproterenol has not. This was an RX only right now, but there are warnings on those packages not to exceed the dose. These are the typical rescue inhalers. You don't want somebody to become so dependent on those that they don't seek medical assistance if their problem persists. So it's required to be on those. It's on those little spray receptacles and also on the outer packaging. I would usually just put a label on that and dispense the whole package to the patient. A few of them have size limitations. One is sodium phosphate laxatives. People kind of weren't using those much, but they have come back into vogue because a lot of colonoscopy procedures now, rather than using the prescription-only products, they will have the patient take 2 bottles, usually at least, of sodium phosphate. The reason they have to say 2 bottles, they don't produce a bigger bottle, is because there's still a federal law saying that a sodium phosphate laxative can't contain more than 90 milliliters. It's because it's not good for you to take more than that. Again, you're doing it for a colonoscopy for the reason that you're doing a complete clean out, but it is still a requirement, and that's why you don't pour your sodium phosphate into a larger bottle for the patient's convenience, because it's actually required by federal law that it be limited to a package size of 90 mLs. Similar situation with Ipecac syrup. I know y'all talk about that as far as poison control. Many of you with small children may have some at home. You still do that? Do you have any at home? You know? Okay. Asking one of our students here I know has children. Some people like to keep some around in case their kids get into something they shouldn't take. Now, we know you induce vomiting in certain cases. You don't induce vomiting in all cases. So again, usually if you're selling it in the pharmacy, unless it's one of these people who likes to just keep it at home, somebody's coming in and they're panic stricken. And they're like, I need some Ipecac syrup. You need to talk with them and kind of, ask some questions, make sure they're using it appropriately, that they're getting some other medical advice to use it, or talk to you about whether or not they should do it. The Ipecac syrup limitation is 30 mL, in a smaller quantity. The active dose of that is 15 mL, which is a tablespoonful, right? So it's basically got 2 doses in it. Got enough to give it one time, and then usually what they do if vomiting doesn't proceed quickly, you can repeat the dose in 5-10 minutes. So that's why they package it in 30 mL. Again, this is the kind of thing, if you are in a situation where you're providing this large scale operation, you need to make sure you have that as well as these other labeling requirements. Somebody else's microphone just opened up, getting some noise from the other campuses. Somebody might have moved their book or something, probably flipped over their pharmacotherapy notes and switched the microphone down. But it sounds like it backed off now. The other things that must be on there is to say keep out of reach of children, again, because it can be toxic. Don't use on an unconscious person. Again, this has to do with that aspiration. And it must contain this statement in red, box on the bottom. So if you think you're going to save a little money, make a little more money by repackaging this yourself, realize you're not going to do it because you have to have all these specific labeling requirements on there. Phenacetin, most of you probably haven't seen phenacetin in practice. It's actually been taken off the market a few years ago. I keep it on here for a special reason. Phenacetin had a requirement that it be included in the label that this product, use of this product cause liver damage and renal failure. What product do you know of that is related to phenacetin? Acetaminophen. Yeah, how does acetaminophen work? It has to be converted in the body to phenacetin. Okay? It's not required on acetaminophen that these warning labels be placed on there. We'll talk about acetaminophen and specifically the very incredible marketing power behind that, the company that markets it as Tylenol. We'll talk about a Tylenol poisoning event. Any lesser company, probably this product would not even be on the market. I actually had a med-chem professor, Dr. Joe LaRocca, who told us that, talked about Tylenol, the liver damage problems and all with that, he actually told us in class that that product would probably be taken off the market during our practice lifetime. It's still the largest selling pharmaceutical product in the world. Again, it's had several challenges to that. I studied it in MBA school, talking about how they resurrected Tylenol. They thought that product would be dead after the Tylenol poisonings that happened in the United States a number of years ago. They brought it back, and no one thinks twice about it. We take Tylenol all the time. We always tell people with kids, you give them Tylenol. Why do we do that? Because aspirin, again, anybody's parents work for McNeil. I'm not trying to get in trouble here, but the company, McNeil, Johnson & Johnson, that markets Tylenol, is the one that came up with the idea that aspirin shouldn't be given to children because of something called Reye's syndrome. Have any of y'all seen in practice a patient with Reye's syndrome? I keep waiting for somebody to raise their hand. I can't see on the other campuses, but if somebody has, please let me know. No one has that I know of in practice. But we are afraid to give aspirin to our children for legitimate reasons as far as concerning about it masking this potential problem. But back in the day when I grew up, we didn't, of course, have Tylenol. We took a lot of baby aspirin. Now we use baby aspirin for something else. We use it to prevent cardiovascular disease. But every time I say Bayer baby aspirin, I remember that taste, that orange chewable baby aspirin that I took who knows how many of as a kid. But again, we decided it's unsafe, and now we have warnings on aspirin, and basically children don't ever take aspirin, right? Okay. Again, we mentioned the alcohol warning on OTC products that contain alcohol so that we can warn our patients or steer them to some other products. It does need to be listed. Sometimes if you haven't already, you're looking at cold remedies, NyQuil, things like that. Look at how much alcohol is in there. There's a lot of alcohol. So, and I'm sure you've probably worked in places where you see people coming in, seeking that because they're using that instead of some other alcohol to feed their alcoholism disease. Package inserts, again, this is part of the regulated labeling. Put that in blue. Very important that you take that concept out of here. When we talk about an FDA label, we're not just talking about that label stuck on the bottle. They did change the design of those back in 2006. We will look at that new design. Most of those have probably been phased in by now. They're basically phasing those in. Old products that have standard labels, again, because that new label has to be submitted to the FDA and approved. They were a little hesitant to do that all at once. But the main change is the highlight section. And again, this is not used so much by patients, but it's used by medical professionals, particularly when we get a new product in, we can open that up and see immediately some specific things in that highlight section. These are all the things that are required to be contained in the package insert. Again, I'm not going to ask you to go through and list those, but make sure you can look at a list and see what should be on there. Do realize it has to have the date of the latest label revision, so you can be assured that it's the most up-to-date information if you're trying to compare it to some other products. This is an example of that highlighted information. It's in the newer version of the package inserts. Again, all of these refer to other sections further down in the package inserts where it's more extensive. This is another one of those examples of the fact that because we can print really, really small, really, really sharp now, we have got these things where a lot of package pharmacies see them. But again, this is not trying for the consumer information anyway. So ideally, your pharmacist can read that, or they have a young student working with them that can read it for them. If they can't read it, they need that information. Drug imprint, believe it or not, that's actually heavily regulated as well. It's required for all prescription OTC medications if they can support such an imprint. Okay, it's used primarily for identification purposes. You all still learn to recognize certain drugs by sight. There are literally too many now to know them all. I actually had a call or a text today from one of my friends that sent me a picture. She's a school teacher. So when she sends me a picture of a drug and asks me what it is, your mind goes all over the place as far as is this something that she has, is this something her child has, is this something she's found on the floor at school or whatever. That one turned out to be just a cold remedy, which did contain pseudoephedrine. But Most of these, they're available online now. A lot of people will just look at their own. They don't have a pharmacist in their speed dial. But realize that is all regulated, so that it's unique for the particular drug in the manufacturer. Wouldn't be good if people just assign these indiscriminately and you couldn't tell which product it was. Now realize this is only for legitimate FDA-approved products. We have a lot of illegitimate drugs on the market now, particularly drugs of abuse, which some are known by their imprints, as far as a little animal or something that kind of makes people know this is just allegedly this type of abusable drug. But there's also drugs that are counterfeit that will use the identification for legitimate drugs to try to pass themselves off as that. There are some exceptions. The most notable one are nitroglycerin tablets, which you may or may not have seen. We always dispense those in an unopened, sealed container. But they're this very small, used to be called HT tablets. There used to be a lot of drugs that were in that form. That stood for hypodermic tablet. Believe it or not, you would actually have some drugs in these HT tablets for the purpose of a doctor carrying them around in their bag, being able to go visit patients. In fact, when they used to make house calls and they needed to give the patient the medication, they would put one of these HT tablets in a syringe and draw up sterile water and give the person an injection. We don't do anything like that anymore. But that is still the categorization of those types of tablets. Any HT tablet, standing for hypodermic tablet, the idea that it's supposed to dissolve and leave no residue, it's too soft and it doesn't contain the excipients and things like that that would allow it to take an imprint. So those will not have an imprint. Again, that has to be approved through their FDA labeling request. Now this section I have struck through. This is the first class that I've actually struck all this through, but I'm still kind of in transition. Pregnancy warning, and don't nod your heads if you maybe learned about pregnancy warning somewhere in classes. And did they still talk about the 5 different categories? Okay, they pretty much thrown that out. You will still see this some in package inserts. It used to be more concise maybe than what we have now, but the problem was it was limited. It really only talked about pregnant females. As we will see, this is transition, started in 2015, and all the categories, the other categories were removed, finalized just last year. They have made more general categories. There's 3 broad categories. That should say broad categories, not broad categories. It can pertain to concerns about pregnancy, which is basically the only thing the old ones covered. It can have concerns about lactation or a nursing mother, and it can also have things about females or males as far as having harmful effects on their reproduction potential. Okay? So they made them much more broad, so you have to really read the package inserts to get that information. It's not just a specific category. The ideal thing before was it always said, there's a type A, so you can use it on anyone, shows no risk. The problem was that didn't necessarily have conclusive studies, and people would just take this information and not really dig any deeper. So they took those categories off and they made them more general, and it's specific to the drug products. Okay? So don't worry about learning those 5 pregnancy categories. REMS, we've talked about REMS already before, and all the different abbreviations for REM that you know in your pharmacy life, or drug life, or medical life, or living there in Athens with the band with the same name. But in this case, and it's called REMS instead of just REM, risk evaluation and mitigation strategies, another one of those abbreviations we have to know. It was a long time ago before they came up with the catchy phrase REMS. It was called restricted distribution. The thing to know there is that there are basically 4 categories of REMS. And some drugs require all of these categories. Most only require the one single one. And that's the one we'll spend most of the time talking about. And that's the medication guide. That picture way back, a few slides back of the Vioxx actually had 2 colors of labels stuck to the side. Some of those were actually the REMS or the med guides that were meant to be torn off and given to the patients. So sometimes they're packaged with the product, or they have to be packaged with the product. Sometimes they're physically attached to the labeling, and other times they're just sent to us in a pad. We'll look at that in a minute, talk about the problems that cause them. Other things that you might not hear about as often, but are very important, especially for our exams and MPJE, something, the next category up is called a communication plan. This is where there's patient training required. Sometimes it has to be provided by the pharmacist. Sometimes it's required to be provided by the prescriber, or ideally a combination of both. There will be protocols that a prescriber has to agree to as far as prescribing this drug for the patient, and then there are surveys to follow up on that and make sure that the patient has gotten that training. Another abbreviation, odd one here, ETASU stands for Elements to Assure Safe Use. That's a little stronger than just a communication plan. This is where there definitely has to be training for prescribers in pharmacy, patient monitoring, more than just education. They may actually require the patients to have certain lab tests prior to approval for dispensing the drug the second time, things like that, or they may have to be enrolled in a program in order to be allowed to their third party to pay for this drug product. So I'm sure you think of some products that require some of those levels. The highest one is implementation system. This is by products that have the highest risk of severe adverse effects, and they may actually limit who can prescribe it. They may actually limit which pharmacies can carry it. And at least one drug we've talked about already, thalidomide, is in this category. It is extremely restricted, and again, I have worked with one pharmacy that was able to dispense it. When you have a female patient, they have to have regular pregnancy tests, things like this. And again, only certain prescribers who have been trained in its proper use and what type of patients can use it can actually prescribe it. If you have the book, you can look on page 79 and 81 for a long, long list of those. I've pulled out a few that I think you're most likely to see in practice, maybe have seen in practice already. Again, the one we've already talked about is thalidomide, which is basically the drug that was being considered that Francis Kelsey decided to hold off on and get some effects on the fetus on it, and therefore was never accepted to the market in the U.S. for its original intended purpose, which was to treat morning sickness, believe it or not. Many years later, it has been approved for use in treatment of multiple myeloma and some forms of leprosy. Totally unrelated to morning sickness. But again, you may work in a pharmacy that would have that. These are kind of arranged. Again, many of you may use Fosamax. This is specifically Fosamax for Paget's disease, requires this, the REMS. Some of these others, Clozaril, things like that, you probably do dispense. I'm going to talk a little bit about Xyrem. We're going to talk about it a couple of times during the semester. It's a very interesting drug from the regulatory, pharmacy law point of view. Xyrem is actually an available commercial product used for treating narcolepsy. However, it is also the same drug that is contained in the product known as GHB, gamma hydroxybutyrate, or the date rape drug. And at that level, it is considered a C1, which we're going to talk about in these different categories. Basically, that means it's not available for use. It is not legal to prescribe. Xyrem is a C3. So here we have the same product in both a Schedule 1 and a Schedule 3. It is a very narrow indication. This product is so controlled, again, because of its abuse potential. It's only available, I believe it's still only one pharmacy in the United States that supplies that. We actually, interestingly enough, had a student a few years ago who was a Xyrem patient. And she ended up talking to me about it. It's a really interesting drug. If y'all haven't had anybody do a seminar on it, if anybody's still looking for a seminar topic from the other campuses, it's a really interesting drug because of its distribution and regulation. To do that, she actually did her seminar on the drug. And again, it's very unique in that it is the same product. It is also this drug of use that we hear so much about as far as the date rape drug. Like I say, there's only one specialty pharmacy that dispenses that, and because of the concern about its distribution, it has to be signed for and all this, and it makes it, a special circumstance. It is somewhat of a problem for the patient to make sure they're able to get this drug. So again, you can help give people information on how these drugs are available. Definitely, participate in the REMS. A lot of it's done, particularly the med guides are done. They're required, but it's voluntary. A lot of pharmacists don't dispense them. These slides look kind of bizarre, so I'll tell you what they are. Some of you may have a picture of this at your pharmacy. This is a little independent pharmacy I've worked at a few times. These are all their med guides. up on top of the shelf up there. And ideally, the med guides here are for something somewhere down this shelf, so that if somebody thinks about it or needs it, they can reach up there and pull those off. I was going to pull one off and take a picture of it for you, but the first stack I pulled off, there was so much dust that fell out of there, and I could hardly breathe. So the point being here is that this is not doing anybody any good. And this is not what the FDA intended when they required these med guides to give this additional information to the patients. So don't let your med guides just sit around on top of the shelf. Okay? Make sure they get into the hands of the patients. Some of the systems that work really well on this, I know some of the chains use this, they actually print the med guide as a byproduct of their computer program, and that's real handy, because it throws it right out there in your lap, so you have it, you get the label, you can give it to the patient, maybe the first time or two, you can talk to them about it specifically if there's some areas you need to point out to them about the proper use of this drug. But this is not the intent, and this pharmacy did end up, the GDNA agent coming in asking, what are those things? And warned them that that was not a good place to keep them, that they were, he could tell again by the odor dust that they weren't actually dispensing those or giving them to the patients when they dispense the drug. So don't get caught in that kind of situation. Okay, another thing that comes up along this line as far as the FDA requirements has to do with off-label use of drugs. And get a lot of questions about this. The official word by the FDA, official as a government person will be, it says that they are allowed, but it is discouraged by the FDA. Discouraged is not very strong, and we all know that a lot of drugs are used off-label most of the time for good reason. And, the pharmacists are told to use their own discretion. Again, that's one of those areas where we have some leeway. You don't want to track everything down, and every time you get one that you assume or presume is being used for a off-label use, you call them the prescriber's office before too long. They get, oh, it's that pharmacist so-and-so calling again about this drug. If you have concerns about it, talk to the prescribers. A lot of times we don't even know. Okay? Again, unless we have that level of communication with our patients, know what they're using it for, we kind of should know if we go down to talk to the patient, as we should, when it's a new prescription, say, what you're using this medication for. They say something other than what you thought they were going to say. Again, you may know that it's used for these off-label uses, and that's fine, and you don't want to necessarily put excessive doubt in the patient's mind. We'll talk about that as an ethics point later on, but you do need to think about that and use your own discretion. Again, the FDA allows it, but they discourage it. What they really want people to do is if it's got a legitimate use or indication for that, they would like the drug company to do what kind of NDA for that? It would be a supplemental NDA to do some studies to show that that is now an approved indication. We know that doesn't happen, and in the best case scenarios, it doesn't happen fast enough. And so you don't want to necessarily make that patient not be able to use that product for that. The FDA doesn't say that. They say that it's allowed, but it's discouraged. Here's what I was referring to earlier as far as the restrictions on marketing, separate from the labeling. This is that oral communication. Okay? Sales reps are limited. The people that are categorized as sales representatives, they may be pharmacists, but probably not. They're probably business majors that have gone through some extensive training and say all the big words and go in and bring lunch to the prescriber's office and get a few minutes with the prescribers and talk about their product, how they want them to use it. They are very restricted as far as what they can say. They are restricted by law to only that information that is approved on the label, basically package insert information. The way companies have gotten around that, and again, they're not doing it only to get around this. They're trying to provide more information to their market or prescribers, is to have they're called various things. Medical science liaison is kind of a standard term, but many of you, if you talk to many people working for pharmaceutical industry, frequently, if the person is a pharmacist, they may have started out as a sales rep, but frequently they will work up to a medical science liaison because they have a working knowledge of medical topics. They can talk to prescribers about things other than just what they've been told by the manufacturer. Some of the things that you learn in pharmacotherapy class, for example. But unless you are at that category, the company should not allow you to talk about that. But again, these people are talking more on a medical science level. They have more background and can hopefully help give the prescriber some discretion as far as using these products for possible unlabeled uses. But a sales rep can't even provide them with an article that's been written about an off-label use. So definitely realize the difference in those two. Okay, back to some of the packaging and labeling requirements. For unit dose packaging, we talked about specifically those things that are required. They're in a hospital, they have to have that barcode, which includes the NDC number. But these are the things required even for unit dose packaging. Again, these are relatively small packages. Hopefully most of you have seen those. Very similar to the blister packs that you see on over-the-counter medication, but these are specifically prescription-only products, usually used in a unit dose system, in a health system or a hospital. Number of doses is one that really doesn't come up that much. It used to be they would package Tylenol for hospitals with a single dose, which was 2 tablets of the 325 milligrams. I don't really know of any other examples of that, but it is specifically a requirement there that if the product contains more than 1 tablet or more than 1 dose, it has to be labeled on there so that they will know that at the bedside or wherever they're actually administering the product. Other things are pretty much standard, definitely special storage information. This would be things like if it requires refrigeration or protective light or whatever like that. Definitely has to be indicated on the packaging. One of the big advantages of unit dose packaging, well before we used it for all the way to the bedside identification, was that we could take things back that had been dispensed in a hospital and give patients credit for it. So one of the main reasons for unit dose repackaging is so it can be returned to stock. But again, this is something that requires the pharmacist's discretion. You have to know that it has been stored appropriately and use your appropriate discretion on that. If something's been riding around the back of the van and all that stuff in South Georgia heat, it may not be a good idea to return that to stock. Okay? Repackaging, again, this you get into that particularly in long-term care facilities. Some hospitals do it. Now that most products are available in a manufacturer's package, they kind of gotten away from doing it in the health system. Have any of y'all worked with a prepackaging machine? You have to do the labeling and run that thing. They're great when they're working. You switch from one drug to another, it's a real pain. So for that reason and the fact that it has to include all this information on it, be wary, be careful about doing repackaging. There are some specific FDA and USP guidelines. Most of the state regulations, like the ones in Georgia, say USP guidelines are in effect. And that specifically, the USP, I actually looked it up in that picture I showed you of the USP a few weeks ago when that one came in. This is still correct, but some people have a concern about this, and some of you may after I tell you this. Basically, when you repackage, the rules for putting an expiration time on that is 25% of the remaining expiration on the original package or 6 months, whichever is less. Has anybody seen people put a 12-month expiration on that? Hospitals did use 12 months, but that is not in compliance with USP guidelines. And most of them have changed back over. But every once in a while I have a student that says, oh, we repackaged at XYZ hospital, and they told us 25% of remaining time or 12 months. And I've got the USP citation I can give you if you need that. But it's actually 6 months or 25% of the remaining time on the original stock bottle. Later we'll talk about, and here I specifically mentioned expiration time rather than expiration date. There's some very specific things about expiration date that's actually an FDA-defined feature based on actual shelf life studies. Something that is coming more into use, especially for compounding now, is the BUD. Not to be confused with the popular beverage of the same name, but this stands for Beyond Use Date. Okay, we're really stretching to just add as many abbreviations in here as possible. But Beyond Use Date is what is used if it is now more appropriate to use that in a compounding situation versus an expiration date, which implies that there's been some specific studies done on that, which may or may not be done on a compounded product. More on BUD later on. Barcoding, like I say, it's only a requirement, but it is an FDA-regulated requirement for hospital products. Most prescription-only products do have it now, mainly because we all use that as part of our error prevention protocols. There are various types of barcode verification software in our computer systems, and many of you use that, I'm sure, in the community practices that you work in. So essentially, most RX-only products will now contain that, and it should be that NDC number, not the universal product code. Okay? With that being the case, well, actually, this is something I'm considering dropping this too. Do we have anybody in the audience? I don't think anybody here works at Target Pharmacy, right? Anybody in Augusta, Savannah, Augusta, Athens, or Albany that works in or used to work in a Target Pharmacy? A few years ago, quite a few years ago now, Target was the first company in forever to come up with a new product packaging type for a lot of really good reasons. As we know, Target got out of the pharmacy business, and they're now all run by CVS. And the last couple of years, I've had somebody that worked at Target, and the last I heard was that they were basically using these until they were gone, and then they weren't going to use them anymore, because they are a lot more expensive. I got from a Target student years ago. I've got a bag full of things I could show you on those. They had a lot of different features, all these little numbered things. I used to get a Target student to tell me about all these things. It was a good news, bad news, as most things are. The big deal was that, look at this large flat surface. Again, with all the technological advances, all the use of computer software for checking for drug interactions, error protocols, and all that stuff, we basically are putting things in the same kind of bottle we put them in for the last 50 or 100 years. Okay? And one of the first things, and again, it's something that doesn't bother you that much when you're young because your eyes are good, but you pick that bottle up and you start spinning it and read it, right? That's really not the best way to make sure something as important as product directions are relayed to our patients. But that's what we do. A few places actually have it where they can print it this direction, so at least you can read line by line, but that is not a dimension at all. The interesting thing about these Target bottles, they were created so they would have a flat surface where the directions were all much more easily readable. This was actually developed by a pharmacy intern who was working on a summer internship at Target and given the project of what would be a better way to do a prescription bottle. And they came up with these things. They have them for, this is for capsules or tablets. They have one for liquids. They have these little rings on here. This is the part that was universally hated by everyone that had to use these. The idea was that you would have and they had, half a dozen or more different colors, and every family member would have their own color. So you could make sure you gave them the right, that they could just look in a box and see the right drug. But those were kind of hard to put on, and you had to make sure that somebody got the color they wanted. The other thing was this little pocket here. The label actually had a non-adhesive part on the back where you could put that med guide or the just regular drug information print out with all new prescriptions. Could be folded up very cleverly or very precisely and slipped in that so that it would actually go somewhere rather than being torn off with the receipt, thrown in the trash as soon as the patient got home and they started taking the medication. So anyway, for obvious reasons, this was expensive. It was so expensive, I don't think that's the only reason Target got out of the pharmacy business, but they could never really see that it was a profitable center for them. Another thing was it had the actual drug name on the very top here. So again, if you arrange these things in your little drug bin, you could pick out the drug real easily. They had a lot of good things on there, but I think basically this has been totally lost. So if anybody is still working with Target and they do see these things coming back, let me know, but we're not going to spend any more time on it. I think it's some good ideas, but we're probably not going to see it in practice. Again, barcoding is pretty standard now. We have some kind of handheld or built into the device. And I always add that, with this happening and us using barcodes for so many things, how far can it be in the future when we're going to actually be barcoded at birth so we can make sure that it all goes to the right patient. They do take it to that level in the hospital. Actually, the patient wristbands or however they identify patients in various health systems does have a barcode on it. So again, the idea, the way it's used in their medication administration protocol is they scan the drug. Sometimes the nurse or whoever's administering it will scan their badge so it says who administered it. It's got a time built in. They scan the drug. They scan the patient bracelet so they make sure they give it to the right patient. Okay? So again, a lot of people have a lot of different tattoos. Some of y'all may have some barcodes. Not so sure it's a patient identification method that we're going to ever see in practice. Okay, going on into a different type of packaging, kind of a standard protocol is med packs. If anybody works for a Medicap pharmacy, which is a franchise pharmacy business, this is something they kind of promote as one of their patient services. They don't do it for everybody, but if you are in a place where you need to refer somebody, a family member or somebody like that needs some extra help with their medications, if there's a Medicap pharmacy, most of them offer this as a service, but it is not limited only to Medicap pharmacies by any means. They kind of started it, made it part of their brand, but many pharmacies do this now for patients and different kinds of long-term care facilities. They have a more formalized form of unit dose, but there's some form of med packs that can be used even in assisted living facilities that don't even have medical care to help patients be more responsible for their medications. A couple of things about that is it does require the same things that unit dose labeling requires. There is a 60-day expiration or less on that, so again, it's tighter than for other repackaging. Basically, this is because, again, patients' medication regimens change. It's very difficult. One of the things we'll see on this, it's all good until some of the medications change. You have to pull some of those medications out. Patients have to start from scratch. But it is a requirement that you not have more than 60 days available at a time in a med pack available for patients. And we'll talk about this when we get to the Georgia Board of Pharmacy. They have specific rules that address that. This is one of those generic types of med packs that are available. There are several pharmacies that I have worked with use for those patients. They can charge a little extra a little extra price for packaging these. The market for that definitely are patients that have complicated medical regimens or maybe not quite as sharp mental capacity as they used to be. But one of the most effective marketing tools, if you're doing this in your independent practice, is to patients' families or to their caregivers to kind of help them, get their medications correctly for the people that they're giving care for. The basics of this one is it has 4 different, rows of containers. The idea is that there's a morning, a noon, a PM, and then a bedtime opportunity there. Some of them get more complicated than that, but that's kind of the generic way this is laid out. The neat thing about this one is it does have some really good software that helps you with the labeling. This particular one, I tried to blur out the patient-specific information here, but leave the other part readable. You have the prescription number, you have the drug name, you have the description as far as what that drug's used for, which is additional to the minimal labeling. You've got the regimen that the patient's supposed to take it, and the prescriber, and then where it's going to be in this package, whether it's going to be in the AM, noon, PM, or HS category. And here the labeling on here shows morning. This person doesn't have midday meds, but it's got bedtime meds over here. And every one of those little cells contains multiple products. That's the big difference in med pack versus unit dose. Unit dose, by virtue of that name, is a single dose of a particular medication. A med pack is actually all the medications. Sometimes it takes 2 packs to get all of the medications that a patient might take at one time. Okay? But the idea is that these things are perforated so the caregiver can actually pop out or break off the AM doses, have it sitting there, for breakfast with the patient, and it actually has all the labeling, has a patient name, prescription numbers, identifies it with this prescription regimen here, and actually lists every single product, quantity, drug, and strength that are contained in that med pack. MedWatch program, we actually talked about this back in the drug interaction course. Dr. Packett gave you a lecture and talked about a number of different things. He mentioned the Drug Watch program, which is an FDA program for drug problem reporting. Patients have adverse drug reactions. I should have said ADR instead of drug interactions, but we talked about it in that ADR DDI class. This is part of our responsibility as pharmacists. It's not one of those things that they check up on us about. It is one of those things that we have a responsibility to report that type of information to the FDA. More and more frequently, drug products are becoming more complex anyway. We've already talked about this phase 1, 2, and 3 process and how it takes years for those products to go through that process. There's always the push to get a new drug product out there so it can benefit patients. Okay? But remember, it's restricted in use to just people in the studies until it gets past that phase 3 process and gets approved by the FDA. They have come up with a term, pretty official, it's called phase 4 trials now. Again, this isn't anywhere else in your notes, so write that down. Phase 4 is actually the post-approval time. So every drug that gets approved is actually still in phase 4 trials. Very important for new drugs, if you start seeing adverse drug reactions, to report that. Believe me, there's plenty of reactions that are reported that are just anecdotal or just one-time things or whatever. But when they start seeing the same adverse drug reaction reported over and over, that's when the FDA starts following up with it. If they don't hear about it on the FDA MedWatch program, they don't ever know about that. Okay? So again, that's part of what our responsibility as practitioners for the best interest of our patients to participate in these phase 4 studies, which are post-approval once the drug is out there and being able to be marketed. Now, true to form, just to bash on the federal government a little bit more, it's a 2-page form. It's all available on the internet now. It has 10 pages of directions. Okay, so it's kind of like the tax forms you might be looking at, getting ready for the April 15th filing on that. But it's not that difficult. Again, with an online form, you can pretty much go through and fill things in as you go. So it's not that difficult. I would not encourage you to read the directions. I just say wing it. And get on there. It's the FDA.gov site for MedWatch, and you can go through there and actually put in a report about your patient's information. And it's very careful how it gets you to word it so you're not doing any HIPAA violations. Again, it's part of your responsibility as a practitioner to do that. Other reporting initiatives you might hear of, the MedMARX, MAR stands for Medication Administration Record, hospital-based, helps prevent errors. Basically, it's to look for the same type of errors that continue to occur, like if a particular drug is being administered incorrectly. Well, if it's just done on an isolated basis, it doesn't ever get reported, you don't ever see it, there's a pattern here. So a lot of these rely on these being reported so they can see these patterns. There's actually one for medical devices, vaccines. Again, y'all hopefully heard about that. All of you are vaccine trained. The VAERS is a vaccine reporting service. And there's even one, believe it or not, veterinary products. So if any of you get to that specialty kind of practice, you might see some situation where you can report an adverse reaction in an animal population. Okay, just a few more things we'll cover today. I was hoping to get through this whole section, but we may finish it up on Thursday and get on into the next set of notes, which you're going to enjoy more. It's going to have to do with prescription requirements in the state of Georgia. So we're going to actually be getting into the things that I'm sure you've been thinking you were going to talk about in law. Kind of got to get some of this background stuff covered first, and we will see where this stuff plays into the rest of the regulations as we go. Drug recalls, always something we like to talk about. News media loves to talk about drug recalls, makes it on the night of the news, that type of thing. There are 3 classifications still for that, 1, 2, and 3. Just know that 1 is the most serious, and they drop down from that. 1 is the one where we have to recall the stock and notify the patients. Luckily, we don't see those very often. Most of the ones we see are class 2. And an example of this has been all the valsartan recalls, and now I'm hearing it's more losartan and other drugs that are detecting this carcinogen at very low levels. I think some of that, not to make light of that, it is a toxic product. It should not be in those products. But the fact that we can test down to those, nanometer quantities now, we're finding things in it that we didn't know were in there. But they are trying to trace that back, and it's resulted in some shortages of all these products. I'm sure all of you have dealt with that. It's also resulted in a lot of phone calls from our patients. Every time they see it on the news, asking if their drug is in that part. Class 3 is unlikely to cause adverse effects, and you usually don't hear about that. You might get a flyer from your wholesaler or something like that about it. Key thing, and I made it blue to make sure you understand what I want you to know about that, is they always make a point when the news media does this, even if it's a very serious, life-threatening type recall, they always say that XYZ drug company voluntarily recalled all lots of this product. And that makes them sound, like they're doing something good for humanity, because they voluntarily did this. They're all voluntary, okay? They're voluntary, but there's a punch that the FDA has waiting. If they don't voluntarily do it, the FDA can seek legal action under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and can seize the products or have an injunction against the firm. And occasionally that does happen. But again, don't feel like the companies are being all that altruistic by voluntarily recalling the product. Legally, they don't want to do it. It costs them a lot of money. They're doing it because they know if they don't do it, the FDA is going to come down on them And this is just a link to a product that was actually put out on the market by one of these large-scale drug compounders operating as an outsourcing facility that knowingly was sending out sterile products that had contamination. The FDA knew about it, they sent them several letters, and they continued to do it. And they ended up having to pull in the power of the FDA and shut the company down, and a lot of their company administrators ended up paying fines and going to jail. This is probably a good place to stop because we really want to cover compounding versus manufacturing. This is very specific, and it does differ in Georgia versus some of the other states. I'm going to teach you the Georgia regulations, even if they're different or stronger than the FDA regulations, but we will mention those other things. One of the main things is that category of outsourcing compounding. Basically, this is something the FDA came up with after the Massachusetts compounding incident to cover those large-scale compounders that really look like a manufacturer. And it actually requires them to comply with a lot of good manufacturing practices stipulations, which again get very expensive if you do it correctly. So the good news is that you can do it in other states. The bad news is it's very expensive. It makes it very hard to make money as a compounder doing that. Of course, additional bad news, as we'll see, that is specifically not allowed in the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia decided they did not have the resources to regulate over this level of compounding, so they decided to handle it by saying we won't let it outsource. We won't provide an outsourced license in the state of Georgia, so no one can get into that large scale compound. Okay, we'll pick up there on Thursday. See you then.